Good afternoon, buenos dias, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore, Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual afternoon with Helen Humphreys to discuss And a Dog Called Fig, Solitude, Connection, the Writing Life, published by our friends at Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Helen Humphreys is an acclaimed award-winning author of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Her work includes the novels The Evening Chorus, Coventry, and After Image, and the nonfiction books The Ghost Orchard and The Frozen Thames. She has won the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize and the Toronto Book Award, and has been a finalist for the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction, the Trillium Book Award, the Lambda Literary Award, and CBC Radio's Canada Reads. To moderate this afternoon's program, we're joined by Mark Doty, the author of more than 10 volumes of poetry and 3 memoirs. His many honors include the National Book Award and a Whiting Writers Award. He's a distinguished professor at Rutgers University. Just a quick reminder that throughout this afternoon's broadcast, you can post questions below in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen. And please order your copy of And a Dog Called Fig from Books and Books and support independent bookstores. Anyone who orders a copy will also get a signed book plate. So order away. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Welcome. Hello.
Hi. Thanks, Christina. Hi. It's nice to be here.
Hello, Helen.
Hi,
Good
Mark.
to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm just so moved by your book, and I feel like you have paid such attention to the lives of dogs and to what they mean for writers. So how did this begin?
It began because the project began because I got a new puppy, and I'm older than I was when I got my previous puppy. And I realized when I got the new puppy that it was hard to do any actual writing. I wouldn't be able to write for probably the first year. And so I just started keeping a little puppy diary about the dog and my relationship to the new puppy and just my thoughts on dogs in general. And it sort of morphed out of that.
Your thoughts are very rich ones. And in fact, I wonder if I could ask you to read us a paragraph. Would that be possible?
Yeah, sure.
If you have...
Not ready, but yes, I will read you a paragraph.
This is on page 106.
106.
Something I think it's just so observant and such a keynote in a way for the whole book.
The paragraph down, like Living with Hazel?
Living with Hazel taught me that one, right.
All right, okay.
Thank you.
Living with Hazel taught me the benefit of balancing the physical world of the dog with the interior writing life. And the wildness of the dog reinforced my own sense of wildness and gave me a sense of freedom as well as companionship. I think, too, that it kept my ideas fresh because I couldn't complacently sink into writerly habits. My being was constantly being shaken out of its routine by the needs of the dog to be a dog, to run through the woods or notice the movement of other animals. Having a dog and living some of the time on the dog's terms kept me immersed in the physical world. A part of me could always be animal in the company of the dog, and this kept me engaged with nature, with the life force, which is also the creative force.
That's beautifully said. And so it seems like your dog's wildness and your dog's vitality was feeding your own vitality and the wildness in your work.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think the interruption that a dog provides in the life of a writer is, although sometimes it feels like it's an unwelcome interruption, it always ends up being something that refreshes or enlivens the work, I found. And so I don't mind anymore being called out to go to the woods or, do the things the dog needs to do.
Yeah, I welcome those, actually. When I have a dog, I don't right at the moment. I lost my dog this winter, and I'm in that period where I'm not quite ready.
Right. How old was your dog?
Golden Retriever, almost 12. So,
oh, that's a long time. That's so hard. Yeah.
It was a long relationship and a very close one.
Yeah.
You talk about And this is much on my mind because of not having a dog now, loneliness and solitude, and the loneliness of the writing practice. Could you say a little bit about that? And what dogs do to help with that, or to mediate it, or even to underscore it, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the loneliness of the writing life has always been the hardest thing about it. I've been a writer since I was young, in my early 20s, in my teens even, but really actively since my early 20s. And I found that maybe some writers can write while other people are around, but I've never been a writer who can do that. I need to be alone. I need no music or sound, or I need things to be relatively quiet and peaceful. But that usually means turning away from other people. If you have a partner, it's going into another room or waiting until they leave the house, or there's all those things you're always balancing. And so I like working, and I like the solitude of the writing life, but there is a loneliness that attends it as well that I've never been very happy about, and I've always found it difficult. And so I think the dog the dog can come into my writing space the way a human being can't. The dog, well, right now I have a dog she's just lying on the floor over there, and no human being could even be in this space. So it's become increasingly evident to me that a lot of my mental health now actually requires on the dog's presence in my writing life. Yeah. And how have you found writing? Sorry, I just wanted to ask you a question about your experience now.
Yeah, sure.
How have you found not having the dog? Like, how has that impacted your writing?
It's hard to answer because it's been a time of much disruption. I just sold a house in the country, moved, had to clear out all that had accumulated there. Just lots going on. And so I'm not sure yet. I've been writing poems in fits and starts, and I haven't been judging them very much. I don't think they're done, but they're on the way. But it doesn't feel quite right. There should be somebody asleep in the corner. Somebody should be curled up on the couch in the room with me. Absolutely. You talk about how intimately you come to know that dog. And I think there's also reciprocally, the dog is knowing you too. And something about that knowledge, that mutual knowledge, feels like part of the work of living with a dog, part of what we do, and a source of pleasure too. I love the place you describe watching the dog, one of your dogs, curl up and go to sleep and not getting this position quite right and curling again and turning again. And you decide that could be the form for a novel, that kind of restless turning and reinvention. I think that's amazing.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, because I have to, I live alone. I mean, I have a partner, but we don't live together. So I live alone. So I essentially live with the dog. So the dog is that, I pay a lot of attention to whatever dog I'm living with because they're there all the time. And so I'm always watching them and trying to figure them out, thinking about them.
I think for writers too, there's something so compelling about a living creature, a sentience here in front of us without language. And we want to supply, the nature of the writer is to want to supply language where there isn't any, I think, so we try to name what's happening. We try to identify how the dog is thinking, reacting, aware and responding to the world. Seems like a writerly habit.
It is a writerly habit for sure. But then don't you find that the longer you know a dog, like you knew your dog for such a long time, and I've had dogs who have lived that long, the more that language becomes completely obsolete in your relationship. Like you don't actually even need to speak to one another, or you need to speak to them because they understand everything about the life together. Absolutely, and true. You have this kind of wordless communication. So I really like that part.
Yeah, me too. Do you live in a place where you have access to the natural world, to wildness?
Yeah, I live in a little town in Ontario called Kingston. It's in between Toronto and Montreal on the shore of Lake Ontario. Right. And it's a pretty small it's a college town, it's like the size of Burlington, Vermont or something. And it's there's quite a lot of wilderness that's easily 5-10 minutes away from my house. So it's very easy for me to go out into nature and take the dog to many different places, actually.
For most of Ned's life, we were living in East Hampton, New York, which has wonderful beaches, wide open woods, and the country is America's largest fenced-in dog park. Dogs are off leash, 65 acres. It was glorious, and that was such an important part of our time together. Just go and run and look and see. And I think you describe in your book how many of your encounters with wildlife came because of your dog.
Yeah,
That's
it's
certainly true for me too.
yeah, I mean, because they accidentally flush something, or something comes
Hmm.
across the path, or they go off and follow a scent trail, and you're forced to follow them, following a scent trail to get them back, and so all these
Right.
things kind of come into your path that I think I I don't think it ever happened to me the same way before I had a dog.
Hmm.
That I
I
would
agree.
be so attached to, because I'm also attached to the dog's attachment to following the
Hmm.
trail, or what they're seeing or smelling. And it helps me to, yeah, to pay attention as well.
Very different for me than living with my dog here in New York City, where we are walking and we're paying attention to our environment. We're sensing, looking at everything around us, but we're looking differently because we're expecting to encounter other people, and perhaps other dogs. Not so much wildlife, although it's possible in Central Park, but I have a feeling when I was walking with my dogs that I was part of a kind of extended consciousness, that I was aware of a broader sphere, and we were part of a kind of mutual awareness society, the two of us, or three of us sometimes, checking things out, monitoring what was going on. I love that feeling.
Yeah, I love that feeling too. That's a really beautiful way of putting it. I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
Sort of like the self gets extended somehow.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely.
So, you also, there's a part of your book I love too, where you're talking about uh, going to a place that was familiar to you and remembering a time in the past there, so that two lines of time seem to intersect in a moment. I can't remember exactly where you were when this happened, but it's very beautifully described. Do you remember that part?
Yeah, I do. That's this place where I go to walk every morning with the dog, and it's
Hmm.
a path across the middle of two fields. And I had walked there with my previous dog, who I got my new dog. When did I get my new dog? In December. My previous dog had died the previous July, so there wasn't that much
Mm.
space between the two. And so the last walk that dog took, Charlotte, my older dog, was across that field, and it was a beautiful, it was July, so it was a sunny, beautiful day. And then here's the puppy in December, so it's a different season, and the puppy's this tiny,
Mm.
wild little creature, but they're going into the same, they're following the same path. And there was this moment where I really felt that intersection of time, where two events are
Mm.
overlaid on top of one another, just separated by time, which almost sometimes feels like a very thin membrane. It feels like almost
Yes.
nothing. And I felt that
How
before with other things, that it's a kind of a magical, I don't know how to describe it really, but just that the awareness I have that time isn't, it is, can lie on top of itself like that, and be
Mhm.
separated from
We
itself by
forget.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We forget
That's,
how porous time is, in a way that membrane that divides us from the past is one that we can sort of pass through. That moments intersect, and the past is called into the present so profoundly, and sometimes we're not quite sure which one we're in, the past or present.
that's
And that,
right.
in a way,
Yeah.
that sort of kind of reflects the structure of your book too, which I found extraordinary. So you're telling the story of your life with Fig, your new dog, and at the same time you're telling the story of your life, sort of in between. And I wonder, can you talk about that structure, like how you evolved that? Did you always know you would do that, or was that a discovery along the way?
No, that was kind of a discovery. I knew I wanted to have different elements in the book. The puppy diary alone, which I was keeping off Fig was a puppy, wasn't going to be enough to carry the whole thing. And I wanted also to include stories of other writers and their dogs, and maybe put some
Yes.
photographs in, which is there as well. But then I also just wanted to talk about my own life in relation to dogs, my writing life. So there were all these sort of different strands to it. And then I had to figure out a way to kind of pull them together. So I organized it. The chapters are sort of organized around elements of writing. There's pacing and
Hmm.
character and that sort of thing. And so I thought that was a good
Right.
way to kind of have some kind of organizing structure to the four. There's like four
Right.
elements really in that book that were kind of hard sometimes for me to braid together, but
Hmm.
I braided them together. So
Did you arrange the story of your life more or less in a chronological fashion, right?
yeah, that's right.
As background, sort of as we're moving through. And I love that oscillation between present, this past, present, another past, present, a later past. It feels very organic, very natural.
That's good. Yeah, it was pretty organic. It just kind of come out of what was, process, right? Which is where a lot of my writing comes from these days, I think. right out of the process. There used to be more of a separation, I think. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah. Oh, I teach memoir, nonfiction writing, and it seems to me the hardest thing for developing writers is getting a handle on how to structure a memoir. It just simply can't be based on memory alone, and nor can it usually be purely linear because that tends to fall flat. So I'm always marveling at well-made and original structures, and I think yours works very well.
Thank you. It's nice of you to say. Yeah. It was
so. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say it was difficult, though. I have to say, in a weird way, for something so highly personal, it was a very difficult structure because I had 4 distinct elements that I was trying to sort of weave in and out of one another, seemingly effortlessly.
Could you name those for us?
Well, there's the puppy diary, which is the little diary I kept when I was, which kind of happens in the present moment in the book. And there's the writing story of my life through writing and through dogs, which is another element. Then there's the other writers and their dogs. And then there's this talking about writing itself, which is the elements that I had divided the book into those various sections.
Right.
So
that is a challenge.
Yeah. But anyway.
So the stories about other writers' dogs are sometimes just amazing. Some of those dogs are pieces of work. Thomas Hardy's pet, for instance.
Yeah, Wessex.
Who liked to eat off the plates of guests at dinner and had his own radio so he could listen to his favorite show.
Yeah, I know. It was so interesting to me how many writers had what we would call very difficult, challenging dogs, right? They weren't easy dogs. They bit people. They, James Thurber's family dog would bite so many people, and his mother would send boxes of candy at Christmas to all the people the dog had bitten, and she was sending, I think, upwards of 40 or 50 boxes every Christmas. So there was it interested me about the difficult dogs because I thought, what is it? The writer, of course, we always make allowances for dogs. We have to make allowances for their personalities and their quirks and their fears and their phobias and all these things because we live with them. But I wonder sometimes, too, if the imagination of a writer is stirred a little bit by the challenge of particular dogs or strong personalities in dogs. Right. And I thought, Thomas Hardy was so attached to his challenging dog. He carved the tombstone for that dog himself, a big slab of stone and things. So it's...
Interestingly, Thomas Hardy... Well, I'm thinking about how Thomas Hardy also wrote the best cat elegy I know, marvelous cat poem. It's interesting that he could have equal affection there. Well, I wonder if writers by temperament are more interested in understanding their dogs than they are changing them. I think we're interested in knowing what is presented to us. And so the personality of a complex dog could be a very engaging thing for a writer to think about and how to try to accommodate it, as opposed to trying to make that dog into something else. Maybe.
I think that's right. I think so. And it's also a place where you can study character, isn't it? You're studying the character of that dog and you're learning about what makes something work, something tick. And I mean, I've certainly learned things. Sorry, go ahead.
Might also reflect our own complexities or difficulties in some ways,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I haven't bitten anybody, but I'm sure it could be prickly from time to time. It's an interesting question. So, I'd like to hear about, just because it's so important to me to think about this right now, about your period in between dogs. And you said you went from July to December, the loss of one dog to getting a new puppy. What happened during that time? How did you move towards? Were you always ready to have a dog? You mentioned your father, I think, going out and getting a new dog the next day after one of his golden retrievers had died.
I was going to spend longer. I didn't do that. No, I was going to spend longer without a dog, but as it turned out, I think that time was. I thought I might do more traveling, but I ended up having to look after a friend's dog for a lot during that time. Weirdly enough, because they were doing something or they were away. So I had sort of a dog around, and then I realized that I liked having a dog around, and that I maybe could, I could maybe do it one more time from puppy to end of life. I could maybe do that journey one more time because I'm not as young as I used to be, but I thought, okay, maybe one more time. So then I started the process of trying to get a puppy. And it sounds like you have the same breed. Do you always have golden retrievers?
I've had various kinds of retrievers. And I do have a real soft spot for them. I have a loyalty to them. When I adopted Ned. Let's see, that was, so I was 56. And at the time, I thought, I don't know, this puppy thing, I've forgotten how much work it is, And so I think now at 68, what would it be like to get a puppy? I think there'd be some challenge in that, although it's also very attractive to me too, the idea of starting with a young one.
Yeah, and I know different people in their 70s who got puppies, and after, they've both been fine with it, and the dogs are great, and it's worked out. It's just that initial period, right? That first, which I had forgotten about, that first sort of 6 months, or where you can't really do anything but sort of mind the puppy and make sure it's not eating the electrical cords, or yeah.
And your
Yeah, because I have Vizslas are the dog that I'm partial to, and they're high energy, a big hunting dog. And Fig, the one I have now, she was even she's the most high energy dog I've ever had or ever known. She's really anyway. So when she was tiny, she just took that out in biting and thrashing around. She was very hard to control, hard to manage, even with the crate. Fig is 2.5. Yeah.
Right. So the writing of the book is pretty recent.
Yes, it's pretty recent. Yeah. She's just starting to become like a normal dog, not so much puppy anymore. But she hung on to her puppiness for a long time. And she did things no other dog of mine has done. Like, she has a real zest for life. She jumped out of my car, which no other dog of mine has done, but managed to, come here, baby, managed to hold on by the harness, that was keeping her in the car, and just dangled on the outside of the car. I guess she just wanted to see what it was like to jump out of the car. She does things just to see what it's like to do them, I think. So in that way, she's a very adventurous, kind of bold dog, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. But I like that about her
Ned,
now.
Yeah, I would like that too. Ned fell out of my car just once. We were on the way to the beach, on a sandy road, and he was just leaning further and further out. And suddenly he was gone. It terrified me. He was fine. It was part of his adventure. He never got that far out the window again, thank goodness.
Yeah. That's I learned to close the window also. No more opening it.
So what are you working on now?
I'm working.
What's new for you?
I'm working on a novel about Thoreau, actually. Henry David Thoreau. Yeah, which is
exciting. So
yeah, it's very different, but also not different.
Lots of research.
Yeah. So much he's written, so much, he's so well known, and he's written so much and so well about himself. It's quite, I had to find a way in that was something that was.
Have you done?
Have I? Yeah, I think I found a way in. I think so. I think I have, and I think I'm dealing more with his life. A lot of things about him are about his writing, but I'm dealing more with his life than his writing.
Okay.
And
great.
So we'll see. But lots about, because he's who he is. There's lots of nature in it, and everything. But
and are you in it too, or is it no? Because it's a novel, so it's a different kind of form. I can't imagine writing a novel. I have never been able to do that. As much as I love novels, I wish I could do it, but something about that kind of imaginative structure eludes me. I've written a number of memoirs and nonfiction books, but that, no.
I think you could
so I'm in awe.
Yeah, well, I think you could probably do it. Having read some of your memoirs.
I just have to decide.
Yeah, it's just getting it. It's the idea and working out the structure, really, right? But I find with what I like about I like Thoreau, but his time, I find, is a quite strangely apocalyptic time, and mirrors our own in many ways that we wouldn't think. So it's that's been interesting to write about. There was all this,
and a time.
Sorry, and a time that's like people romanticize that time and think it was this sort of height of nature and naturalness and wilderness, but in actual fact, all these things were going on which were counter to that. So
yes. Industrial development and lots of pollution and difficult labor conditions. Yeah,
and overhunting. There was in his lifetime, I think it's the beaver, the coyote, and the deer were pretty much extinct. They had been overhunted. He only saw 2 deer in his lifetime and thought it was like a momentous occasion, right? So we're so used to seeing deer, like it feels.
Yeah.
So anyway, those things were interesting, and also the treatment of the indigenous people, the lead up to the Civil War. There's all this stuff that's happening. That's anyway interesting. So
my most recent book is a kind of meditation on Walt Whitman's work, that includes quite a bit of autobiographical stuff. So it's sort of Walt Whitman in my life. And I have to confess that I took a poem of Thoreau's and put it in the book next to Whitman, just to demonstrate what work Whitman did to free us up from European conventions. And poor Thoreau, I think he's a wonderful prose writer, but the poems,
Yeah.
not what I would wish for. Yeah.
No,
But
no,
the
I
prose
know.
is so gorgeous, unforgettable.
Well, his diary is his best
So
thing
how-
he ever did, I think. But yeah.
Yeah. One of the problems with the Whitman book is I tried to just read everything, and I reached the point of being absolutely up to here. I was so saturated I could not take in another thing. And I just stopped reading Whitman's criticism, didn't stop reading him, but anything, biographies and criticism, I had to draw the line and find an imaginative way to approach and form myself out of that. How do you handle the huge bulk of material about Thoreau?
Well, I stayed away from critical writing about him, actually. And I read his entire diary, which was very lengthy. It's like, I don't know, millions of words. But I read it all from beginning to end. I stayed with his voice and his words. And I read there's a great biography Laura Wells wrote about him that I had previously read. So I had that. And really, I just used his own diary as the major source for everything. And then I kind of, would read around it if I needed to know something about the Civil War or a particular thing or something. So, so I tried to, because I was talking about his character, I wanted to stay steeped in his character, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to.
Is it first person?
No, I couldn't do first person with him because he writes so well about himself. I mean, that's one of the things I thought I can't do that. So it's third person, but it's a close third. And it's structured, anyway, it's structured like a journal in that there's small pieces with lots of white space around it. But it's not a journal, right? I do follow chronologically. I had to make these various decisions, right? As I suppose you did too. Like so I take his life chronologically from beginning to end, but I focus on things that I don't think other people have talked about. So it reads almost like a person you don't know, right? So it's hopefully it does. Anyway.
That sounds really exciting. And how, I know this is naive because I have written extended nonfiction, but I feel like the faith that's required to write a novel must be very large because you have your concept of structure, you begin, and you know that the end of this process is way out there somewhere, and yet I think you know that you're going to get there. So I guess this is the question people ask me that I never have a good answer for is, where do you get the courage? How do you have the faith to do this?
Well, with me, it's all about how I remain engaged with the material, right? I have to, if I'm not engaged, if I can't remain engaged with the material, I'll give up. That's because I'm not interested anymore. So I trick myself, I guess. I have little tricks. Like I make a structure that's appealing to me and I want to kind of re-enter that structure, or, I do little things that keep me engaged. I also try to write a first draft really, really fast so that I stay pretty high on the material. And it's not just, I'm not spending years trying to, hammer out a few pages a day. I'm trying to do it in 3 months or 4 months, and I'm working really hard, and everything feels pretty intense. And so that's sort of how I do it. Yeah. And then I often,
have you already done it now?
Yeah, it's done. I'm rewriting it at this point, but it's mostly done. And then if I usually write
an extensive thing?
No, I try to rewrite in, I usually write a bit short, so I usually have to add things in rather than a writer who cuts things out. But I don't mind adding things in, and I just try to do rewriting in layers. So, one layer will be, I don't know, historical timeline, and I'll just concentrate on that. And the next layer will be a character or something, and I'll concentrate on that. So I'm not really tackling the whole thing in its entirety each time.
Right.
So, I think you could write a novel. Honestly, it's breaking it down into manageable pieces and finding a way to just be engaged with your subject matter or your story. Sense. Yeah. Because if you were, that Whitman book is probably like a novel. I mean, you probably
in some ways,
right? Like it has a journey.
Yeah. Well, because it moves. It has a journey in it. Yes, there's an arc, both of the narrator and also for Whitman. There is a process of arriving somewhere going on that is sort of parallel in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that gives me some curiosity about it. That's great. I was aware of your, not minimalism exactly, but of writing short, as you put it, in A Dog Named Fig. That you move very swiftly sometimes, but very effectively from one moment to the next, or you're able to capture a scene in a few sentences, and that's a real gift.
Yeah, well, I started as a poet, and I think, if you start as a poet, or if you've been a poet, if you've ever written poetry, you have a taste for brevity, right? Because you want to say the most with the least, and I think that
Sure.
I think that's sort of carried over into my fiction. I find it very hard to go on and on. I just want to sort of get to the point and move past it and get to the next point. Yeah.
It's a great tendency. I love to go on and on. And I think of myself as sort of a maximalist in language. I love fulsome sentences. And even as a poet, I do, and I try to just write it all out, and then I prune it back and throw out and try to shape more. So it's a different temperament that hopefully gets to the same place, or something like the same place eventually.
Yeah.
I figure our job is to get really good at being ourselves, whatever that means.
Yeah, that's right. And more efficient at it, I guess, which usually happens with age, I think. Hopefully, anyway.
Yeah, I think so. So how many novels have you written?
This will be my 10th.
Amazing. I bow to you. Marvelous.
It gets harder, though.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah, it does. It gets harder, well, because, creating a fictional world is about leaving the world you live in to live in the fictional world. And as I get older, I get less willing to do that, I think. I'd rather sort of stay in my normal life, right? I'd rather go outside because it's sunny out and not have to sort of labor through 1852 or something, and all the things that are happening.
Right.
So
I still think of myself primarily as a poet, and for me, it gets harder to write poetry, in part because after you've written a fair amount of it, I feel like I've sort of staked a claim on how I see the world, and then to have return to freshness can be difficult, to surprise myself, and therefore.
And so how do you do that then? How do you?
Try to write something that doesn't sound like me, to dive into perception and not worrying so much about, how good is the poem, but trying to just really be allegiant to what it's like to be in the moment.
That's great. And is it successful?
Sometimes slower than it used to be. It's been a few years now since I published a book of poems, and I have one in the works, and it's sort of 2/3 of the way there. It will be done in a year or so, I think, depending upon how much teaching I do and other circumstances. Do you teach at all?
I just started teaching. I mean, I have taught off and on all through my life, but I am teaching regularly now. I just started this fall at Queen's University, so I'm teaching. But but it's that's a nice addition, actually. I did it off and on, but it's nice. Okay. It's nice seeing the writing of the young people. I really enjoy that.
Yes,
it's really nice to see what
they're doing.
Do
you find it affects your? Yeah, I like that too, and also I like working with other adults and seeing people come more into themselves and finding their own language. Do you find it takes away from your own writing time or your own work?
Definitely. But I'm okay with that now. Actually, okay. I'm all right with having some of that time taken away. I think I'm I'm all right with that. Because I think, I'm at a point where there's more books behind me than there's going to be going forward, right? So I'm going to pick and choose what I do going forward in a slower, more methodical way, I think.
Seems wise.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come in and get to some audience questions as well, and just say, Mark, we want to read your debut novel.
Okay.
And we believe that you have it in you. So,
hold your breath.
If you're watching, they're going to be after you. So we have a few questions here. One, I think you've already answered it, but maybe you can add to it. What kind of dog do you have?
Yeah, I have a Vizsla, Hungarian Vizsla, which is a kind of pointer. They're the smallest of the pointers. They're sort of red. They look a lot like a Weimaraner, but they're red and they're slightly smaller. So
and how did you come to own that breed or have that breed?
When we got
drawn to it.
Yeah, when we were looking, I was looking with a former partner for our first dog, which is 3 Vizslas ago. We were just narrowing down different breeds about things we liked and didn't like. And what we liked about the Vizsla was they don't need any coat maintenance. Like they have a very short coat, so you never need to brush them. You never need to wash them really. That everything just kind of comes off them. And I didn't want to brush a dog, or I just had ideas about it. And also they're not big barkers. They don't tend to drool, and they're the only dog without a smell, which is strange because they're trying to be for the things they're hunting. They don't want to have a scent, I guess. So they're kind of pretty odorless. So they have all these sort of non-dog qualities, I guess. But
interesting. Yeah, my dog is so stinky.
And also they bond very closely to their people, and I like that as well. They're very attached and it's very sensitive, and
so
I love how you said the 3 Vizslas ago, Helen. It's like the Vizsla is a unit of time. It's very nice.
Yes, it is a unit of time. Taken all of sort of best years of my life, the Vizsla has, but that's okay.
That's a beautiful.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. So Sarah would like to know, which was your favorite writer's dog to research or write about? And there's another question about talking about your research into the lives of writers and their dogs.
I think probably the Thomas Hardy dog, because he was just so kind of bad. Like he was badass, I guess is what he was. And he had his strange addiction to the radio. And the fact that Thomas Hardy was actually, once he was rehearsing one of his own plays, and it was the time for the dog's radio program, and the dog had made such a fuss, he had to drive the dog back and interrupt his own play rehearsal so the dog could listen to his radio program. So I just liked that, the difficulty of that dog and the way that Hardy bent around his needs. So it was.
And how did you choose the writers that you focused on? Were you
some of them were writers I liked myself, like Virginia Woolf is one writer who I admire. They're all mostly writers I have read and liked. So I sort of started there and just I tried to choose interesting stories about them, that was something I thought interesting in their relationship with their dogs, and that they weren't all having sort of the same kind of relationship with their dogs. So it was just for variety, I guess.
And the book has a lot of great pictures too of the writers with their dogs, which I really like. So can you talk about the cover?
Yeah, that's Fig on the cover. And that's a painting done by someone who works at FSG, who in her spare time is a pet portraitist. Oh. And she painted that from a photograph of Fig when Fig was about 4 months old, maybe, but it's a really good expression. She got it perfectly anyway, the expression of the dog.
Such a beautiful cover,
Yeah, it's a great cover.
Beautiful, beautiful cover. Wow, that's great. So here's a question from Joan. Have you provided for your dogs in your estate plans? Who will care for your dogs when you leave this plane of existence?
Well, I have a partner and I have friends who have, so I'm pretty sure my dog, we have a kind of extended dog pack where there's a group of us who are all friends or partners, or we're all, involved with one another in some way. And we have also all have dogs. And so I think my dog could easily be absorbed into any one of those people's lives if something happened to me, because we see, the dog knows all the people and all the dogs. So.
And then how is this book different from other books that you've written?
Well, I think it's more personal. I did write a memoir about my brother dying, which was also personal, but this book is more, the Fig book is just about the sort of meat of my daily life, really, which I don't tend to write about or talk about, which is it's more my private life with dogs and yeah. So I think in that way, it's my most personal book.
It's a lovely idea. Did you write it during the pandemic at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's all written during the pandemic. Yeah, because I got my dog really at the start of December 2020, I guess, which is just the beginning of the pandemic here anyway in Canada. And so
I've not come across something quite like it.
That's
I don't know
good.
that I can think of. So it's definitely something unusual and has a niche. As a
Good.
bookseller, I'm always looking for a way to like put the book in someone's hands. And this was not difficult because of the cover too. It's so beautiful. So that's great. So I think that's it for questions from the audience. Just building, I have a question for both of you, maybe like building off of Mark's temperament question. Why do poets see the world so differently?
You mean from each other or from
Getting an
everybody
answer.
else?
What is it about the way you look when you're looking at the world? What is it? And I guess I'm asking also because my mind's a lot on National Poetry Month, on poetry. We're doing a lot of projects at Books and Books that have to do with poetry. And I just know that there's a different sensibility. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, so go for it.
Well, I'll hazard a guess. I think poets understand that the most profound appreciation we have of the world, intake of the world, happens when we're feeling, when we're perceiving, so the senses are at work, and when we're thinking about what we perceive and what we feel. So a poem always has those three elements going. It's trying to understand, it's trying to just look and hear, smell and taste the world. And it has a heart at the same time. And that is different than what happens. It's a little different than what happens in telling a story. And it's certainly different than what happens in writing sort of general nonfiction. It's a way of being in the world. Means that being a poet is sort of a way of life, I think.
That's good. And I think I would add too that often poems tend to be highly visual because you're dealing with you're trying to get the most across in the least amount of words or space. And so you rely on the visual elements are strong. And I think that poets have usually a pretty good observational eye and at noticing things that they can then build poems around or put it into poems. So,
I went to a museum recently. I hadn't gone in a very, very long time. And it was contemporary art. And I realized the person I was with, who's a writer and a poet, knew how to look at art, just knew how to understand it, how to read about it, how to read about the concepts and understand. And I thought to myself, I've done visits with other types of people and they don't know how to see the world. Like they don't know how to view art. They don't understand what art is in a way, so I find it just like a lovely gift that to have that, as you said, a way of being, a way of perceiving, a way of moving through the world. And all of those things are on my mind these days. Yeah. So thank you both so much for spending this afternoon with us. Thank you to our viewers who are watching. Remember that you can get this book at Books and Books. You just press the green button down here. If you're in Miami and you want to come by any of our stores, or in Key West as well, where we have our store with Judy Bloom, please order away. And thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for sharing a big part of yourselves with us today. And I hope we'll see you in person in Miami soon. Yes? No, maybe? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Great question.
And thanks to FSG.
Thank you, Christina.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
It was great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.